I can tell you now that the Petrel, the ship that we're on, which has been looking for the Hornet, has in fact found it.
Well,
A legendary warship, a 17,000-foot abyss, a lone robotic drone sliding through the blackest waters on Earth. This isn't science fiction. This isn't a movie. This is the real story of one of the most extraordinary deep-sea discoveries in modern history. This is the story of the USS Hornet. For 77 years, she was believed lost forever, vanished during the most brutal years of World War II. She wasn't just sunk, she was consumed by chaos, claimed by fire, and swallowed by the endless Pacific. For decades, the Hornet's final resting place was nothing more than a spectral rumor, guessed at, speculated about, argued over, but never found, until now. Because when an unmanned submersible finally slipped into the darkness to track the last moments of this iconic carrier, what it found was not a broken wreck. It was something impossible, something breathtaking, something haunting. It wasn't metal, it wasn't debris, it wasn't ruin. It was a memory, perfectly preserved. A battlefield frozen in time, a ghost that refused to die. Time capsule in the dark. Descending through the crushing pressure of the abyss, the drone drifted into a world that has no sunlight, no sound, no warmth. Down here, metal should be stripped bare. Steel should collapse. Nature should consume everything. But then, a shape emerged from the dark. A colossal wall of steel. Rivets etched with history. A hull marked by battle. And stamped on the side, barely touched by time, the number 8. The drone inched forward, lights cutting through the black, and the images it sent back stunned even the most hardened deep-sea explorers. A set of anti-aircraft guns, still locked in position, stood ready, as if expecting enemy planes to swarm overhead at any second. An aircraft tug, a tiny steel tractor used to maneuver planes, sat upright, untouched, waiting for its next mission. It looked so intact that one explorer whispered it could still start. And then the drone saw something extraordinary. A Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighter, wings folded, completely intact, perfectly parked. It was as if the flight deck crew had stepped away for lunch in 1942 and never returned. But the true shiver came when the drones pushed deeper, slipping into the interior. A jacket still hanging neatly from a hook, a toothbrush inside a wash kit, a metal cup resting where someone left it, shoelaces still tied in a pair of boots. These weren't objects. These were lives, frozen in place. Every item told a story no history book could capture. This wasn't just a wreck. It was a moment, paused for nearly 8 decades, and the world was about to learn the story behind the ship that refused to fade into history. The carrier that struck first. To understand why the Hornet's discovery mattered so deeply, you have to understand the legend she forged long before she sank. Commissioned in October 1941, the USS Hornet was one of the newest Yorktown-class aircraft carriers in the Saarbrück U.S. Navy. She entered service just weeks before the attack on Pearl Harbor, just as the world was about to change forever. She wasn't battle-tested. She wasn't a veteran, but she was about to make history. Because her first major mission would become one of the most daring, improbable, and bold military operations ever attempted. The Doolittle Raid. In April 1942, under strict secrecy, the Hornet loaded 16 Army B-25 Mitchell bombers onto her flight deck. Bombers that were never meant to take off from an aircraft carrier. They were far too large, far too heavy, and far too important. But this mission wasn't about returning. It was about sending a message. Japan had struck first. Now America was striking back. On April 18, 1942, The Hornet steamed to within 650 miles of Japan. And then, against all odds, those 16 bombers launched, one by one, off the deck. Their destination? Tokyo. Their objective? Shock a nation that believed it could never be touched. The raid didn't cripple Japan's war machine, but it rattled its soul. It was the first time enemy bombs had ever fallen on the Japanese homeland, and the world took notice. The Hornet had fired the first true counterblow of the Pacific War. But her story was only beginning. NTO the fire. 2 months later, she was thrown into the most decisive battle in the Pacific, the Battle of Midway. Here, the Hornet fought alongside her sister carriers, Enterprise and Yorktown. Together, they launched wave after wave of planes into one of the most ferocious carrier battles in history. Hornet's aircraft dove through walls of anti-aircraft fire, battling Japanese fighters in the open sky and striking at carriers far below. Several of her squadrons suffered devastating losses. One torpedo squadron, VT-8, was nearly wiped out entirely. Only one pilot survived. But their sacrifice was not in vain. Because by the end of the battle, 4 Japanese carriers, the heart of their fleet, were burning wreckage sinking into the depths. Midway became the turning point of the war. And Hornet, again, was right at its center. But the Pacific is a place where victories come with a cruel price, and Hornet's heaviest burden was still waiting for her. The Lone Warrior. After Midway, the war did not slow. If anything, it became even more desperate. The Hornet sailed south to the Solomon Islands, a chain of brutal battlefields where American and Japanese forces tore into each other day after day. For weeks, Hornet was the only operational American aircraft carrier in the region. Just one ship, thousands of men, holding the entire Pacific line. Her pilots flew non-stop missions to support the Marines fighting for their lives on Guadalcanal. Dawn to dusk, they launched, battled, returned, refueled, and launched again. The Hornet wasn't just a ship anymore. She was a lifeline. Her decks shuddered under the weight of constant takeoffs. Her hangars reeked of oil, sweat, and burned rubber. Her crew slept in brief bursts, eating cold food between air raids. The ship itself seemed to groan under the strain. And then, in October 1942, the stress became too much, because the Japanese Navy was ready to break her. The final battle, October 26, 1942, the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. Before dawn, Hornet's radar lit up with the worst sight imaginable. Wave after wave of incoming Japanese aircraft, dive bombers, torpedo planes, and escort fighters. War was coming straight for her. The sky turned black with aircraft as the Japanese threw everything they had at the U.S. carriers. The Hornet fired first. Her gunners tore into the sky, filling the air with walls of steel and fire. But there were too many. A bomb slammed into her flight deck. Another tore through her island. Then torpedoes, 2 of them, ripped into her hull. 16 separate impacts in total. The shock waves shook the ship so violently that men were thrown off their feet. Fires erupted across multiple decks. Power failed. Engines died. Smoke choked the corridors. The Hornet was dead in the water. Still, her crew fought. They battled flames, rerouted power cables, tried to restart engines. But the damage was too catastrophic. The order came: abandon ship. Men jumped into oil-soaked water. Destroyers raced to pick them up. Some didn't make it, but the Hornet still refused to sink. American destroyers fired 9 torpedoes into her hull. She stayed afloat. They fired more than 400 shells. Still she floated. It wasn't until Japanese ships arrived and launched yet more torpedoes that the Hornet finally slipped beneath the waves. She carried 140 of her crew with her into the dark, and for 77 years, no one saw her again. A billionaire's quest. Finding the Hornet wasn't easy. It wasn't quick. It wasn't inevitable. It took someone with resources, vision, and a deep personal passion for history. That someone was Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft, philanthropist, and explorer of the deep. His ship, the RV Petrel, was a floating underwater laboratory, equipped with cutting-edge sonar systems, autonomous vehicles, and remotely operated submersibles capable of diving miles into the ocean. But the mission didn't begin at sea. It began in archives. The team combed through hundreds of pages of war logs, naval reports, damage assessments, and survivor interviews. They studied drift patterns, last known radio coordinates, ocean currents, battle maps, anything that could narrow the search. The Pacific is unimaginably vast. Finding one lost ship in its depths is like finding a single grain of sand in a desert. But the team refused to give up. Eventually, they found their window, a search zone, a target area, a possible location. And then they launched the drone. The moment they found her, the autonomous underwater vehicle swept across the ocean floor, scanning the darkness with high-resolution sonar. It moved in a tight lawnmower pattern, methodical, precise, relentless. Hours passed, then days, and then a shape, huge, man-made, upright. The team deployed the ROV. Its cameras lit the void. And suddenly, there she was, the USS Hornet, intact, silent, majestic. Her island superstructure rose from the seabed like a skyscraper swallowed by the deep. Her deck, scarred but whole, stretched into the darkness. Her aircraft, her equipment, her weapons, her markings, all preserved in a world with no oxygen, no decay, no sunlight. The deep hadn't destroyed her. It had protected her. And the world had just rediscovered a legend. The last witness on land, thousands of miles away, a 95-year-old man named Richard Nowatzki, sat down to watch the footage. He had been a gunner's mate aboard the Hornet in 1942. He was 18 years old when she sank beneath him. Now, 8 decades later, he was seeing his ship again. The footage played. The ROV drifted over a gun mount, and Richard leaned closer. "That's where I was," he whispered. His eyes filled with tears. The memories, friends lost, battles fought, nights spent in terror, rushed back all at once. And then, with a shaky smile, he added, "If you go down to my locker, there's $40 in there. You can have it." It was a joke, but also a truth, because the Hornet wasn't just steel. She was home, and the men who served on her had left pieces of themselves inside her walls. Now, the deep had returned their memories to the world. A grave, not a wreck today, the USS Hornet rests silently beneath 17,000 feet of water, protected, respected, untouched. She is safeguarded by the Sunken Military Craft Act, recognized not as a relic, but as a war grave, a memorial, a place of final rest for the 140 men who went down with her. The mission to find her was never about recovering treasure or raising steel. It was about remembrance, to honor their sacrifice, to preserve their stories, to ensure they were never abandoned in the dark. The deep holds many secrets, but some secrets deserve to be found. Echoes in the deep. The discovery of the USS Hornet is more than a technical triumph, more than a historical curiosity, more than a sunken carrier rediscovered. It is a reminder that heroes don't disappear, that sacrifice echoes through time, that the ocean, for all its darkness, sometimes chooses to return what it has taken. The Hornet is not just a ship. She is a symbol of courage, of resilience, of a generation that stood against impossible odds. And now, thanks to the explorers who sought her across the darkest waters on Earth, her story has risen again. A ghost, yes, but a ghost that speaks, a ghost that teaches, a ghost we must never forget, because sometimes the ocean gives up its dead, not to haunt us, but to remind us who we are, and who we must never stop striving to be.